In courts of law throughout the world, lawyers try to convince a judge or jury of their point of view. It's always crucial to their arguments that everyone understands the basic facts of the case. So frequently, near the end of a trial, lawyers review the facts, stating them as plainly as possible in a series of propositions. This is a fact. That is a fact. This happened. That happened. Well, in many ways, the same kind of thing is true in systematic theology. Systematicians also have to establish certain facts, certain theological facts. So they present their cases in straightforward theological propositions. This is the third lesson in our series, Building Systematic Theology. And we've entitled this lesson, Propositions in Systematics. Traditional systematic theologians are committed to exploring, explaining, and defending sound Christian theology. And as we will see in this lesson, an essential part of that commitment is expressing Christian beliefs in theological propositions. Our lesson will divide into three main parts. First, we'll gain a general orientation toward propositions in systematics. What are they? And how do they fit within the process of building systematic theology? Second, we'll explore how propositions are formed in systematic theology. And third, we'll examine some of the values and dangers of this focus on propositions. Let's begin by focusing our attention on some preliminary considerations, a general orientation toward this aspect of building systematic theology. Our orientation toward propositions in systematics will touch on three issues. First, we'll provide a general definition of propositions. Second, we'll focus on their legitimacy. And third, we'll describe the place of theological propositions. What role do they have in the whole process of building a systematic theology? Let's look first at our definition of theological propositions. I suppose that most of us sense that theology can be expressed in a variety of ways. When we pray, sing hymns, evangelize, tell Bible stories to our children, or discuss our faith with our friends, we're expressing Christian theology. But in the discipline of systematic theology, there is one main way theology is verbalized, and that is in the form of theological propositions. For our purposes, we'll define theological propositions in this way. A theological proposition is an indicative sentence that asserts as directly as possible at least one factual theological claim. Before we look at the details of this definition, let's take a look at some examples of what we mean. In the second volume, Part 2, Chapter 2 of William Shedd's Dogmatic Theology, he made these statements about the twofold obedience of Christ. A distinction is made between Christ's active and passive obedience. The latter denotes Christ's suffering of every kind. Christ's active obedience is his perfect performance of the moral law. Here we see that Shedd made three basic assertions. First, he made a general statement that Christ's obedience can be described in two categories, active and passive. The second is that Christ's passive obedience was his endurance of suffering. And the third is that Christ's active obedience was his flawless fulfillment of God's moral law. Now, recalling our previous lessons, we can see that Shedd focused on two technical theological terms, passive obedience and active obedience. But in this lesson, we're more interested in the way theologians like Shedd incorporate technical terms into theological propositions. To explore this issue, let's look once more at our definition. A theological proposition is an indicative sentence that asserts as directly as possible at least one factual theological claim. This definition focuses on four characteristics of propositions in systematic theology. First, they are indicative sentences. Second, they are factual claims. Third, these factual claims are primarily theological in nature. And fourth, they make direct factual theological claims, or as we put it, they state matters as directly as possible. Let's take a closer look at each aspect of this definition, beginning with the idea that theological propositions are indicative sentences. Now, we all know that there are different kinds of sentences in ordinary human language. For instance, the sentence, "Where is my key?" is an interrogative, a question. "Open the door" is an imperative sentence because it issues a command or invitation. Neither of these sentences qualifies as a proposition. But the sentence, "My key will open the door," is an indicative sentence that declares what the key will do.